LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer CNN Univision Democratic Debate Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the top 14 clips that I think were most watchable, most important from last night's Miami debate. That was a Univision debate that was simulcast on CNN. I got my clips from CNN along with the translations. This is the last Democratic debate before what they sometimes call mini Super Tuesday. That's next Tuesday, March 15th, will be the Florida primary, the Ohio, Michigan, Missouri primary. So all of these states are up for grabs, and so Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are fighting for him after Bernie Sanders' big upset last Tuesday in Michigan, where he beat Hillary Clinton. He got a few more delegates than Hillary Clinton in Michigan, and one of the questions they asked Hillary Clinton in the debate last night was how she did in Michigan, or why she did it so poorly in Michigan. I did not take that clip, but if you look down in the video description, you'll see a link to the CNN page where they took out their own clips from the debate, including Hillary Clinton's answer to why she didn't do so well in Michigan, or her non-answer, because I don't think she really answered that question. Another question she refused to answer is the first clip. Oh, and by the way, if you're watching this as a recorded show, I've put descriptions of all 14 clips down in the video description and time indexes down there so you can skip to the topics that most interest you. I'm adding my political analysis and media criticism along the way to make this all a fair use video. Hopefully I'll be able to stream it, but without any sort of copyright blocks. I've made some changes, you'll notice along the way, shrinking the clips down just a little bit, hoping not to have the copyright block. Otherwise, I'll have to upload it as a recorded show later. Let me get to the first clip. This is Hillary Clinton answering a very forward question from the moderator Jorge Ramos about whether she would quit the race if she's indicted over this email scandal. And then Bernie Sanders also talks about the email scandal over in this clip.
I'm not concerned about it. I am not worried about it. And no Democrat or American should be either.
The questions were, Secretary Clinton, the questions were, who gave you permission to operate? Was it President Obama?
There was no permission to be asked. It had been done by my predecessors. It was permitted. I didn't have to ask anyone.
If you get indicted, would you drop out?
Oh, for goodness, that is not going to happen. I'm not even answering that question.
Senator Sanders, you have gone from saying the following. The American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails, to claiming that it is a very serious issue. Which is it?
There is a process underway, and that process will take its course. Today in America, the middle class is disappearing. We have massive levels of income and wealth inequality. Climate change threatens the whole planet. 47 million people live in poverty. I'm going to focus on the issues facing the working families of this country. That process will continue.
Sorry about that problem. I thought that Bernie Sanders did a good pivot there to other issues, did not want to attack Hillary Clinton on the email issue. Whether you think she should have dodged the question about the possible indictment, I don't think that's very likely, but I want to move on to Hillary Clinton's answer about what she thinks about Donald Trump as to whether or not he's a racist. Then I'll compare that to Bernie Sanders' answer, basically to the same question from Karen Tumulty last night over in this clip.
Secretary Clinton, you've known Donald Trump a long time. You've seen what kind of campaign he's running. Secretary Clinton, is Donald Trump a racist?
You know, Karen, I'm going to follow my friend Senator Sanders' model here. If I'm so fortunate enough to be the Democratic nominee, there will be a lot of time to talk about him. I was the first one to call him out. I called him out when he was calling Mexicans rapists, when he was engaging in rhetoric that I found deeply offensive. I said, basta. And I am pleased that others are also joining in making clear that his rhetoric, his demagoguery, his trafficking in prejudice and paranoia has no place in our political system, especially from somebody running for president who couldn't decide whether or not to disavow the Ku Klux Klan and David Duke. So people can draw their own conclusions about him. But I will just end by saying this. You don't make America great by getting rid of everything that made America great. And
Secretary Clinton, my question is about his character. And that is one of the primary things that Americans think about when they choose their next president. How would you describe the character of a person who has said the sorts of things he has about Mexican immigrants, about women, and who would ban people from entering this country based on their religion?
I think it's un-American. I think what he has promoted is not at all in keeping with American values, Karen. And I'm going to take every opportunity to criticize him, to raise those issues. I'm not going to engage in the kind of language that he uses. I think we can make the case against him if he is the nominee by pointing out what he has said, what he claims to believe in, the values he's promoting, and I think that's a better way for the American people to draw their conclusions.
Senator Sanders, do you think it's
So first I wanted to stop that answer from Hillary Clinton before I get to the same answer pretty much from Bernie Sanders. I thought Hillary Clinton actually did a better job of answering this question than the one you're about to see, the answer from Bernie Sanders. I liked her use of the word basta in there, the Spanish word basta, meaning enough. The only criticism I'd have of her answer is that she didn't really directly answer Karen Tumulty's question about, her long history of knowing Donald Trump and his character. She never said he was a racist, but Bernie Sanders doesn't specifically say he's a racist either, and also has more of his talking points in response to the question than a direct answer to Karen Tumulty's follow-up question to Bernie Sanders over here.
Sanders, do you think it's fair to call Donald Trump a racist?
This is what I think. I think that the American people are never going to elect a president who insults Mexicans, who insults Muslims, who insults women, who insults African Americans. And let us not forget that several years ago, Trump was in the middle of the so-called birther movement, trying to delegitimize the President of the United States of America. I find it very interesting, Karen. My dad was born in Poland. I know a little bit about the immigrant experience. Nobody has ever asked me for my birth certificate. Maybe it has something to do with the color of my skin.
So what does that tell you about his character?
I think, and I am very pleased. I am very pleased that I think in the last national poll that I saw, we were running 18 points ahead of Donald Trump.
On Facebook, millions of people are talking.
So you can see there, Senator Bernie Sanders also did not directly call Donald Trump a racist. There were good parts to his answer. I like that whole relating to the immigrant experience, because as you'll see in some upcoming clips, a lot of this Univision debate did focus on the immigration issue. But I thought overall, maybe just because his answer was shorter, he didn't get as much follow-up time as Hillary Clinton did, but he didn't push as much time as Hillary Clinton did. His answer wasn't quite as detailed about Donald Trump, and it also had some of the same problems with the talking points that Hillary Clinton had. Now I'm going to move on to several questions on the immigration issue, which is an issue that I've worked on a lot over the last few years here in California. If you watch my videos for a while, you know that, and I will discuss my personal experiences with undocumented immigrants along the way as I show some of the clips on this. The first two clips I'm going to show are, first it's Bernie Sanders. Let me make sure I have that right. Yeah, first Hillary Clinton has to explain her previous tough stance on undocumented immigrants, and then Bernie Sanders, they actually play him a clip of his appearance on the Lou Dobbs show talking about how immigrants drive down wages for hardworking Americans or something like that. But it's kind of like an equal opportunity gotcha clip, or it's just a quote for Hillary Clinton. And then I'll discuss that a little bit before I show you the Bernie Sanders clip. Here's Hillary Clinton defending her anti-immigrant or anti-undocumented immigrant stance from the past. Over here.
About it the most, Marilyn.
So, Secretary, I have a question for you. In 2003, you said on a radio show, specifically it was John Gamblin's radio show in New York, that you were adamantly against illegal immigrants and that people have to stop employing illegal immigrants. Your new immigration plan is that you would expand President Obama's executive actions and that you would push for legislation that would include a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. So are you flip-flopping on this issue, or are you pandering to Latinos, what some would call Hispandering?
Well, in 2003, I sponsored the Dreamer Act. I sponsored it, I think, in every Congress after that. I have been consistent and committed to comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship. I think our best chance was in 2007, when Ted Kennedy led the charge on comprehensive immigration reform. We had Republican support. We had a president willing to sign it. I voted for that bill. Senator Sanders voted against it. Just think, imagine where we would be today if we had achieved comprehensive immigration reform 9 years ago. Imagine how much more secure families would be in our country, no longer fearing the deportation of a loved one, no longer fearing that they would be found out. So I am staunchly in favor of comprehensive immigration reform and have been so over the course of my public career.
So you can see Hillary Clinton is ready to go after Bernie Sanders, especially after that Michigan loss on not voting for comprehensive immigration reform when George W. Bush proposed it back in 2007. And they'll go back and forth with a lot of heat and some light. That's, I think, the difference between the Democratic debate and the Republican debate is that even when there's some heat between the Democrats, you also get some light as to what their positions are. On the Republican side, it seems to get into the nasty insults that you won't see in this debate. There are a little bit of sharp edges, but no nasty insults. And anyway, as I promised first, here's Bernie Sanders responding to a gotcha clip. This is actually, they'll show the video of him talking to Lou Dobbs and saying that immigrants drive down wages of hardworking Americans or something like that. And then this clip goes on for a while, and I'll split it partway through the back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders to make a comment, and then I'll show the rest of it after that. Here's the beginning with the Lou Dobbs clip from last night.
Senator Sanders, in 2007, you voted against immigration reform. You now say that it was because the bill had guest worker provisions which seem semi-slavery. But back then, this is what you said to CNN's Lou Dobbs. Let's listen.
If poverty is increasing and if wages are going down, I don't know why we need millions of people to be coming into this country as guest workers who will work for lower wages than American workers and drive wages down even lower than they are right now.
And is there no other principle?
So, Senator, were you concerned with working conditions for guest workers, or really because you think immigrants drive down wages and take jobs from Americans?
Well, you have guest worker programs that have been described by the Southern Poverty Law Center, one of the important institutions in this country who studies these issues, as guest worker programs akin to slavery, where people came in, they were cheated, they were abused, they were humiliated, and if they stood up for their rights, they would be thrown out of the country. Of course, that type of effort leads to a race to the bottom for all of our people, and I work very hard on that issue. And of course, I supported the 2013 immigration reform bill. And what I believe right now is not only that we need comprehensive immigration reform, if the Congress does not do its job as President of the United States, I will use the executive powers of that office to do what has to be done, to do what President Obama did, and expand on that.
But if you're saying that you would expand on the executive actions. How do you know that they're not going to end up in a legal battle, just like Obama's executive actions?
I don't know. And I should also say, with regard to that 2007 immigration bill, as you may know, LULAC, the major Hispanic organization in this country, also opposed that bill, as did many other Latino organizations. But to your point, we have to do the best that we can. I applaud President Obama for his efforts in DAPA and DACA, and I think we have got to expand those efforts.
If I could respond, you know, I think it's very hard to make the case that Ted Kennedy, Barack Obama, me, La Raza, United Farm Workers, Dolores Huerta, leaders of the Latino community would have supported a bill that actually promoted modern slavery. That was one of the many excuses used not to vote for the 2007 bill. And I will go back to what I said. If we had been able to get that passed, we would be so much further along now. I'm committed to defending DAPA and DACA. I'm committed to going even further to get more people deferred action, to go as far as I can under the law. And I am committed to introducing comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship in the first 100 days of my presidency.
Secretary Sanders. Senator, would you like to respond?
Well, when we talk about efforts to assist immigrants, Secretary Clinton prevailed upon the governor of New York, Eliot Spitzer, who wanted to do the right thing and provide driver's license to those who were undocumented. She said, don't do it, and New York State still does not do it. In Vermont, by the way, I work with officials, and undocumented people in Vermont do have the ability to get driver's license. When we talk about immigration, the Secretary...
And that last point about driver's licenses, from my experiences here in California, that is really, really important for undocumented immigrants to be able to drive legally and have interactions with local law enforcement without having to worry about losing their car, getting taken away to custody, to, you know, every time they drive around. I've talked to several undocumented immigrants and heard undocumented immigrants tell stories about their fear of just driving to pick up their kids at school or to do various other things. And that's why here in California we passed AB 60, which was our undocumented immigrant driver's license bill, and we finally got that passed here in California, and it really increases the quality of life of people who live in our communities and are, you know, hardworking members of our community. And just because our immigration system is broken doesn't mean that they should have to live in fear every day. I mean, the whole situation is sad, which I will discuss more concretely when they show a victim of our immigration policy a little bit later. But you notice Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders started to get a little bit heated in their exchanges there, and it gets even more heated when you'll see Bernie Sanders. You know, one thing I wanted to say about those accusations going back and forth in that last clip, what Bernie Sanders said about the driver's licenses in New York is true, and Hillary Clinton did oppose, because it's a tough issue if you want to be a centrist, to be for undocumented immigrant driver's licenses. Hillary Clinton did oppose undocumented immigrant driver's licenses in New York, but a lot of the stuff that Hillary Clinton is accusing Bernie Sanders of is sort of like cherry picking things in bills he voted for when he was voting for other reasons. Well, Bernie Sanders is actually going to talk about that in the clip after next I'm going to show. But first, here's Bernie Sanders also making an accurate charge against Hillary Clinton that she said things about sending Central American refugee children back to, like, send a message to their families not to send more refugees on this perilous journey. Which, you know, there is some wisdom to Hillary Clinton's position, but she, well, you'll see the back and forth on that over in this clip.
The Secretary will remember that one of the great tragedies, human tragedies of recent years, is children came from Honduras, where there's probably more violence than almost any place in this country, and they came into this country. And I said, welcome those children into this country. Secretary Clinton said, send them back. That's a difference.
Let me respond again, because the misrepresentation can't go unanswered here. First of all, that is something that is not fair about what I said. I did say we needed to be very concerned about little children coming to this country on their own, very often, many of them not making it. And when they got here, they needed, as I have argued for, legal counsel, due process, to make a decision. We need to end private detention. We need to end family detention. And in 2006, when Senator Sanders was running for the Senate from Vermont, he voted in the House with hardline Republicans for indefinite detention for undocumented immigrants. And then he sided with those Republicans to stand with vigilantes known as Minutemen, who were taking up outposts along the border to hunt down immigrants. So I think when you were running for the Senate, you made it clear by your vote, Senator, that you were going to stand with the Republicans. When you got to the Senate in 2007, one of the first things you did was vote against Ted Kennedy's immigration reform, which he'd been working on for years before you ever arrived.
Let me respond. Let me respond to that.
Go ahead.
You know, Ted Kennedy was a very close friend of mine, and I served on the committee that he chaired, the Health, Education, Labor Committee. And Ted Kennedy was kind enough to allow me to hold a hearing in 2008, I believe, in Congress, dealing with the plight of undocumented tomato pickers in Immokalee, Florida. And I went there on my own, wasn't an issue really for the state of Vermont, to expose the horrendous working conditions and the semi-slavery, if you like, that those workers lived under. And the result of that hearing and the work that many, many people did was to significantly improve the wages and working conditions of those workers.
Senator Secretary, we're going to take a break and we'll continue talking about immigration when we come back.
Great, thank you.
So they took a break there, and then I'm skipping several questions, but you saw that Hillary Clinton accused Bernie Sanders of supporting the Minutemen, which is this vigilante group that patrols the border and, you know, tries to detain undocumented immigrants, and they have a really bad reputation. And I cut out, like I said, several of the back and forth questions that came after the break, but I wanted to take it up where Jorge Ramos asked Bernie Sanders finally to respond to that whole Minuteman thing, which he does. And then he points out this thing I was saying earlier about Hillary Clinton's attacks on him being based more on like picking out little pieces of really large pieces of legislation, and that leads to a little back and forth between them on the auto bailout versus the Wall Street bailout, which I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Did you support the Minutemen, Senator? Did you support the Minutemen?
I'm sorry?
Did you support the Minutemen as Secretary of the United States?
Of course not. There was a piece of legislation supported by dozens and dozens of members of the House which codified existing legislation. What the Secretary is doing tonight, and has done very often, is take large pieces of legislation and take pieces out of it. No, I did not oppose the bailout or the support of the automobile industry. No, I do not support vigilantes, and that is a horrific statement, an unfair statement to make. I will stand in terms of my political career, fighting for workers, fighting for the poorest people in this country. Madam Secretary, I will match my record against yours any day of the week.
Well, let's do that. Let's talk about that.
Senator,
Let's talk about that.
You said this morning
Let's talk about the auto bailout, because I think it's important for people to understand what happened. In December of 2008, we were both in the Senate. There was a vote on a freestanding bill to rescue the auto industry. We both voted for it. It was the right vote. Unfortunately, it did not succeed. The Republicans marshaled the votes against it. A month later, in January, A new piece of legislation was offered that contained the money that would be used for the auto rescue. Then President-elect Obama, before he'd even been sworn in, sent word to all of us that he really hoped we would support it. He was still in the Senate. I was still in the Senate. And I voted for it. It was a hard vote. I'll tell you, it was a hard vote. A lot of the votes you make are hard votes. But the fact is, the money that rescued the auto industry was in that bill.
Secretary,
now, Senator Sanders voted against it. That's his perfect right to vote against it. But if everyone had voted as he voted, we would not have rescued
30 more
the
seconds
auto
and we'll pass to another. 30 more seconds, and then we'll move to another.
So that everybody knows the bill that Secretary Clinton is talking about. That was the bailout of the recklessness, irresponsibility, and illegal behavior of Wall Street. It was the Wall Street bailout. And I find it interesting that when Secretary Clinton, who was the former senator of New York, of course, when she defended her vote, she says, well, it's going to help the big banks in New York. Those are my constituents. And then you go to Detroit and suddenly this legislation helps the automobile workers. There was an article just yesterday where people like Senator Bayh and Ron Wyden, Byron Dorgan, former senators said, no, this wasn't the automobile bailout.
We
this
have
was
to
the
move
bailout
on,
of
Senator.
Wall Street.
The time is up. We have to move on. Next question.
So one thing I fault Senator Bernie Sanders for in his answer there, you remember that clip started with Jorge Ramos prompting him to say he wasn't a supporter of these vigilante, anti-immigrant Minutemen, and he did say he was against that, but then he pivoted into his, economic justice talking points, which I don't think that's not the strongest issues for this particular audience. Maybe he's trying to talk to people in the Midwest for the Ohio primary, and he doesn't think he has a chance in Florida, which he probably doesn't have a chance in Florida, but I just don't think going into those abstractions about legislation and going back and forth about the auto and the Wall Street bailout, that's really what people want to hear about immigration. They want to hear about responses, or they want to hear a response to the problems of real people. And that's the next two questions I want to show are from the same audience member. Her name was Lucia, and I believe she's an undocumented immigrant. She said her husband was an undocumented immigrant who was deported. She has 5 U.S. citizen children, and her story reminds me of multiple stories I've heard in Sacramento. And Bernie Sanders, his answer is okay. I don't think he completely heard the translation. I'm not sure you can even completely hear the translation. I actually listened to the Spanish and a couple times till I could figure out what she was saying. I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I understand enough to hear, she's talking about the pain of her 5 children when her father was, or not her father, her husband was deported 3 years ago. And I think most of that gets translated. And first Bernie Sanders answers her question, and I think he talks about how her children shouldn't be separated from their mother, instead of realizing that she's talking about the father having been deported, and that's the family unification she's interested in. And but he has some strong points in his answer. It's just not quite as strong, I think, as Hillary Clinton's answer. I'll show after I show Bernie Sanders' answer over here.
The audience, for both of you, tenemos una pregunta de nuestra audiencia. Pasamos con Enrique Acevedo.
Muchísimas gracias, María Elena. Secretaria Clinton, senador Sanders, quiero presentarles a Lucia Quieje. Ella es una inmigrante guatemalteca, está aquí con sus 5 hijos, quienes no han visto a su padre desde que fue deportado hace 3 años. I want to go to Lucia Quieje. She's an immigrant from Guatemala. She's here with her 5 children who have not seen their father since he was deported 3 years ago. She has a question for both of you. Doña Lucia, ¿qué le quiere preguntar a los candidatos?
Quiero yo preguntarle que yo tengo un gran dolor, yo y mis hijos, porque el padre de mis hijos fue deportado sin tener licencia, por no tener licencia. Él era un hombre trabajador en el campo de la construcción. ¿Qué pueden hacer ustedes para parar las deportaciones y reunificar las familias?
Senator Sanders, as you can see, this is a very painful and personal issue for Lucia and her family. She wants to know what you would do to stop deportations, but most importantly, to reunite families like hers.
Well, I absolutely support that. At the heart of my immigration policy, and I should say that the New York Times editorial board called my immigration policy the most progressive and the strongest of any candidate running. But to answer your question, the essence of what we are trying to do is to unite families, not to divide families. The idea that a mother is living here and her children are on the other side of the border is wrong and immoral. A number of months ago, I talked to a young man who was serving in the United States military. And while he was serving in the military, his wife was deported. That is beyond comprehension and policies that should not be allowed to exist. So, ma'am, I will do everything that I can to unite your family. Your children deserve to be with their mother.
Senator Sanders. Thank you, Senator Sanders. Yes.
And you heard he said your children deserve to be with their mother. He should have said with their father. Just it's a slight little slip up, but it's, you know, the human touch, or like maybe he couldn't hear because some of the translation you could like hear some translation. I don't know if the candidates had in their earpiece. That's why I went back and kind of translated it for myself. Before I move on to Hillary Clinton's answer, which I think was a little bit better than Bernie Sanders, which there were some good talking points in that answer, and I think he did connect with the audience, just not as well as I think Hillary Clinton does. But one thing I want you to think about before I move on to Hillary Clinton's answer to the question from Lucia is, can you imagine Lucia asking a question of the Republican candidates? Or worse yet, can you imagine Lucia showing up at like a Donald Trump rally? Just the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans on, you know, understanding undocumented immigrants on the human level, and seeing them as human beings and people, and not the other and the scapegoat. Or that's my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'm gonna move on to Hillary Clinton's answer to Lucia, which I think was a better politician's answer, and you can let me know what you think after you watch it over here.
Yes. Secretaria Clinton, usted también ha dicho que no quiere separar a más familias, pero ¿cuál es su plan para reunificar a familias como la de Lucía y para unir a miles de niños estadounidenses con sus padres? Secretary Clinton, you've also said you want to stop deportations, but what's your plan to reunite families and thousands of children, U.S. citizens, with their parents?
Well, first of all, please know how brave I think you are coming here with your children to tell your story. This is an incredible act of courage that I'm not sure many people really understand. And I want you to know that in the work that I've done and the many families that I've met, I have heard similar stories like yours, where your husband is deported, your children's father is gone. You are doing your very best to support your children, but it is time to bring families together. And I don't think there's any doubt that we must do more to let stories like yours be heard more widely so that more Americans know what the human cost of these policies are. And I will do everything I can to prevent other families from facing what you are facing. And I will do everything I can to pass laws that would bring families back together. And I hope that your children are all either citizens born in this country or eligible for the programs that President Obama has put into place, DACA and DAPA, because I will defend those and I will absolutely protect your children, yourself, and try to bring your family back together.
Gracias, Secretaria Clinton. Thank you, Secretary Clinton. They are U.S. citizens. Your 5 children are U.S. citizens. Thank you. Now let's go back to Karen.
Thank you.
And you see at the end there, the translator verified that Lucia's 5 children are all U.S. citizens, which is what makes these situations, I mean, you don't want to deport the parent of a U.S. citizen. That's someone who you want to find a way to keep in the country. If it's someone without a criminal record, someone who has a job or is taking care of children, who's, hardworking members of our community. And I thought when Hillary Clinton said in that last answer that she's heard other stories like Lucia's, all I could think was, yeah, here in Sacramento, just my local work in Sacramento, I've heard multiple stories very similar to Lucia's, and Lucia's over in Miami, and that just makes me think there got to be thousands and thousands of Lucia's all over the United States. And if you think about the human cost to the terrible immigration policy, the human cost to, hardworking families in our communities, I guess I've said that several times, but it's an issue I've worked on here in California, trying to give some protection to undocumented immigrants, at least when they come into contact with local law enforcement. But the only real answer is comprehensive immigration reform, which was blocked by Republicans in the House of Representatives after Marco Rubio and Chuck Schumer and the Gang of Eight came up with their compromised comprehensive immigration reform. Well, I guess we'll see what happens after the election, maybe in 2017. I've heard people on both sides claim they're going to pass comprehensive immigration reform, but what kind it's going to be. Well, anyway, that was the last clip on immigration of a series on immigration. Now I'm going to show a couple clips where Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton clash on the issue of Wall Street and the billionaires, and this is, of course, the big issue that drives Bernie Sanders' campaign. And he starts off with really humorous reason, I thought, as to why he wants Hillary Clinton to release the transcripts of her. She's made these speeches to these big Wall Street firms like Goldman Sachs, and she said she'll release the transcripts when everyone, including the Republicans, release the transcripts of all their private speeches. But anyway, here's Bernie Sanders talking about that, and I will discuss it a little more. Well, I'll pause the clip about halfway through. This is about 4 minutes into a 6.5 minute. There's a 4-minute part of a 6.5 minute argument about Wall Street that I will pause and give you a little more commentary after you watch the first 4 minutes of it here.
You have demanded that Secretary Clinton release the transcripts of her paid Wall Street speeches. Why is this important? Do you have reason to believe that she says one thing in private and another in public?
Well, what I have said is that when you get, I believe it is $225,000 for giving a speech, and she gave several speeches to Goldman Sachs, one of the Wall Street financial institutions whose greed and illegal behavior helped destroy our economy a number of years ago. When you get paid $225,000, that means that that speech must have been an extraordinarily wonderful speech.
So does this mean that you would not think she would have to disclose?
I would think that a speech so great that you got paid so much money for, you would like to share it with the American people. So I think she should release the transcript.
Senator, so you're saying that it's the
Secretary said, well, she will do it if other people do it. I will do it. I didn't give any speeches. There is no transcript.
But my question was, do you think she's saying one thing in these speeches and another in public?
That is exactly what releasing the transcripts will tell us. This I do know. This I do know. There is a reason why Wall Street has provided $15 million just in the last reporting period to the Secretary's super PAC. Now, the Secretary says it doesn't influence her. Well, that's what every politician says who gets money from special interest. The question that the American people have to determine, you could say that Wall Street is greedy, they're fraudulent, but they're not dumb.
Thank you, Senator.
Why are they making those kind of large contributions?
Thank you. Your time is up.
Well, let me respond, as I have numerous times during this campaign. I have a public record, and you can go look it up. I went to Wall Street before the Great Recession and basically called them out, said that their behavior was putting our economy at risk, called for a moratorium on foreclosures. I went to the Orlando area during the 2008 campaign to make the same case, visiting with families who had been defrauded by mortgages, these subprime mortgages that put them and their homes at risk.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton.
I called for those changes. I have been on the record, and now I do have the toughest, most comprehensive plan to go after Wall Street, and not just the big banks, all the other financial interests that pose a threat to our economy. And I have said no bank is too big to fail, and no executive is too powerful to jail, and I will use the powers that have now been passed by the Congress, by President Obama, who, incidentally, took a lot of money from Wall Street, which didn't stop him from signing into law the toughest regulations on the financial industry since the Great Depression.
Look. Clearly, the Secretary's words to Wall Street has really intimidated them, and that is why they have given her $15 million in campaign contributions.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
What I believe is, in fact, that we have a corrupt campaign finance system. And it's not just Wall Street, it's the drug companies who have received millions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry. We've got to overturn Citizens United.
Wait a minute. Now, I just think it's...
So I thought Bernie Sanders was pretty funny there about at the beginning of that clip when he was talking about how Hillary Clinton's speeches must be like the most wonderful speeches on earth, or not quite that extreme, but having been paid $250,000 or $260, I can't remember the exact number, but over $200,000 per speech. They must be the most wonderful speeches, and the American people would benefit from being able to read these wonderful speeches. I thought that was kind of funny. You can let me know if you like that down in the comments section. And the thing that I said before about how Hillary Clinton makes these attacks on Bernie Sanders that are kind of disingenuous, that to try to match up with Bernie Sanders attacks that, I mean, attacks is kind of a strong word. They're sort of like policy differences. They're like sharp words over, contrasts in policy differences from the past or from the present. And here you're going to see Hillary Clinton try to respond to Bernie Sanders' charges about her being too close to Wall Street and getting all this money from Wall Street by saying, oh, well, the Koch brothers, they really are supporters of Bernie Sanders. They love socialist Bernie Sanders, which is totally ridiculous. They did apparently make some ad in favor of Bernie Sanders because he opposed the Export-Import Bank, which comes out at the end of this clip. But I don't know. I think it takes some chutzpah for Hillary Clinton to make this charge, but she goes ahead and she does it anyway. I don't know if she gets anything out of it. You can let me know what you think after you watch it here.
I just think it's worth pointing out that the leaders of the fossil fuel industry, the Koch brothers, have just paid to put up an ad praising Senator Sanders. There are a lot of different powerful interests in Washington.
Secretary.
I've taken them on. I took on the drug companies. I took on the insurance companies. Before there was something called Obamacare, there was something called Hillary Care, and I worked really hard to get comprehensive health care reform, and they beat me. So I have a long record of standing up to special interests, and I will continue to do so.
We're going to move on to the next question, and it's
Can I just briefly...
Go ahead, please. You have 30 seconds, Senator.
There is nobody in the United States Congress who has taken on the Koch brothers who want to destroy Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and virtually every federal program passed since the 1930s more than Bernie Sanders. And I am proud that the gentleman who is head of Goldman Sachs, now he didn't give me $225,000 for speaking fees. He said I was dangerous, and he is right. I am dangerous for Wall Street.
All I can say,
we're going to move on to the next.
I guess, Senator Sanders, that the Koch brothers, as you said, are sensible with how they use their money, and I agree with you. They stand for things that I find abhorrent, that would be bad for our country, bad for our future. But they did just put up a little video praising you for being the only Democrat who stood with the Republicans to try to eliminate the Export-Import Bank, which has helped hundreds and hundreds of companies here in Florida be able to export their goods and employ more Floridians. So, from my perspective, you signed it with the Koch brothers.
Let me respond. The Export-Import Bank is often called the Bank of Boeing because Boeing Corporation gets 40% of the revenue. It is corporate welfare, and yes, I oppose corporate welfare.
Okay, next question. I want to continue with the issue of trust. Secretary.
So I'll tell you what Jorge Ramos was about to ask there next in just a minute, but I thought Bernie Sanders got the best of that back and forth. Like I said before I showed the clip, I can't even believe that Hillary Clinton was trying to claim that the Koch brothers support Bernie Sanders, but you saw it for yourself there. And one thing I thought was kind of cool, I have kind of criticized the audiences at the Republican debates for they seem to be like trained to boo for their candidate or like boo at the time that is beneficial for their candidate. Well, although they do occasionally boo the moderators for being biased, but in that last clip, I like the way they booed Jorge Ramos when he tried to move on to the next topic before Bernie Sanders had a chance to answer that ridiculous accusation from Hillary Clinton about the Koch brothers supporting Bernie Sanders. So I wanted to point, I guess at least Jorge Ramos was good enough to not really move on and to listen to the audience or listen to Bernie Sanders and let him answer and give it a couple more minutes like you saw happen there. What he wanted to move on for, he said, I want to go on more about the issue of trust. It was a Benghazi question. And when he asked the Benghazi question in a clip I'm not going to show, he actually got booed by the audience again. I think the Benghazi scandal is another one of those scandals, like the email scandal. And the email scandal may still have some developments. The Benghazi scandal is so played out. I'm just so sick of it. And I'm not even going to show the clip of Jorge Ramos asking Hillary Clinton about it. But I will show how Bernie Sanders is given a chance to talk about Benghazi, and he doesn't take the bait, but then he pivots and uses it for one of his talking points you've seen on the Sunday shows in my Sunday clip roundups, where he's started coming, instead of just talking about Iraq all the time, he's come up with other examples of Hillary Clinton being too fast to support regime change, and he uses Libya as an example of that over in this clip.
Well, I'm not going to comment on the Benghazi tragedy, but I will say this. A series of articles in the New York Times talked about Secretary Clinton's role in urging the administration to go forward with regime change, getting rid of Gaddafi in Libya. Gaddafi was a brutal dictator, there's no question. But one of the differences between the Secretary and I is I'm not quite so aggressive with regard to regime change. I voted against the war in Iraq because I had a fear of what would happen the day after. Secretary Clinton talks about Henry Kissinger winning the praise of Henry Kissinger. I don't want Henry Kissinger's praise at all.
We're gonna take a break. We're taking a break. Vámonos a una pausa comercial y continuamos con temas que le interesan a los hispanos, como quién paga por la educación y qué.
So, yeah, like I said, Bernie Sanders didn't take the bait on the Benghazi scandal, but he did turn it back to his talking points on Iraq, and he even turns it back to his talking points on Iraq in this next question, where they're actually talking about the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington, D.C. jobs. I think in the question they mentioned how many U.S. Treasury secretaries that have been appointed by Democrats have come from Wall Street, or specifically Goldman Sachs, I believe. At least 2 have come from Goldman Sachs that I can think of. And you'll hear both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders answer on this. And yes, Bernie Sanders does come up with Iraq before the end of this clip, the second to last clip from the broadcast tonight over here.
Senator Elizabeth Warren says personnel is policy, and she says that there is a revolving door between Wall Street and the highest levels of economic policy making and regulation in Washington. 3 of the last 4 Treasury secretaries appointed by Democratic presidents had ties to Citigroup. Do you agree with Elizabeth Warren's criticism that both your husband's administration and President Obama's have relied too heavily on advisors who represent the worldview of the big banks?
Well, Karen, I do agree that we have to end the revolving door. I strongly support a piece of legislation from Senator Tammy Baldwin that would do just that. And I will be looking for people who will put the interests of consumers first, who will do more to try to make sure Main Street flourishes. And I will very much reach out and ask for advice as to who should be appointed, including to Senator Warren and many of my other former colleagues in the Senate. But I think it's important also to look at what we want to accomplish. You know, in the debates we've had, maybe this is the 7th or so, Senator Sanders is always criticizing the two recent Democratic presidents, President Clinton and President Obama. And that's fine, but I wish he would criticize and join me in criticizing George W. Bush, who I think wrecked the economy and created the conditions for the Great Recession. You know, at the end of the 90s, we had 23 million new jobs. Incomes went up for everybody. We were talking earlier about what needs to be done for Latinos and African Americans. Well, we were doing it by the end of the 90s. Median family income went up 17%. For minorities, it went up even more. Along came the Republicans. Trickle-down economics, one of the worst ideas since snake oil, was put back into place. And we ended up with the Great Recession. President Obama had to rescue the economy, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for doing that.
Senator Sanders, your name was mentioned.
Well, let me say this. I gather Secretary Clinton hasn't listened to too many of my speeches or followed my work in the Congress, because very few people stood up to George W. Bush, whether it was the war in Iraq or any other of his policies. Now, when we talk about the policies of the 1990s, I worked closely and supported President Clinton, and obviously I have worked very closely in supporting President Obama, who has taken our economy a very long way from where Bush left us. But when you go back to the 1990s, let's remember, that's when Wall Street deregulation took place.
You, Senator.
That's when disastrous trade policies took place. So yes, good things happened, but some dangerous mistakes were made that laid the groundwork for some of the problems we're having with a disappearing middle class.
Thank you, Time is up. Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Latin America.
So I thought Bernie Sanders got the best of that clip as well. There were a couple clips along the way that I said I thought that Hillary Clinton did a better job of answering. The one from Lucia, I thought she did a better job, and there was one or two others, but I showed 13 clips already, and in most of them, I think Bernie Sanders did better. I thought he did a better job in the debate overall, and also based on the clips I just showed you, which I thought were the best clips. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. There's one more clip I'm going to show you. I normally don't show clips from the closing statements because they're like set pieces. They're basically memorized speeches, or occasionally they seem a little more off the cuff and will relate to what happened during the debate. But I wanted to show the end of Bernie Sanders' closing statement. First of all, because you'll see right at the beginning of this, he talks about Citizens United and public financing of campaigns. And I have some quibbles with the way people on the left talk about Citizens United as sort of a overall label for the problem of the extreme effect of big money on politics, which I think is a real problem. Big money affecting politics is a problem. I just think that the answer to the problem is public financing of campaigns, which we haven't really tried, especially since we never updated our presidential matching fund system. And anyway, I wasn't planning on going into that whole issue, but I did want to mention that Bernie Sanders said public financing of campaigns here because I noticed a big campaign finance reformer, Professor Lawrence Lessig from Harvard, posted something saying that this was the first mention of public financing of campaigns in the debates or in the Democratic debates. I'm not sure. I thought one of the early ones it came up before, but I could be wrong. And then the other thing that's really remarkable about this clip is that Bernie Sanders, at the end of his closing statement, gets a standing ovation from a significant part of the crowd, and they cut to Hillary Clinton kind of laughing nervously about it. And I let the clip play all the way through, the moderator saying thank you to both people, because then they get some polite applause, but it's pretty clear the standing ovation is for Bernie Sanders. And I thought it was kind of a strange FeelTheBern moment at the end that I wanted to include, which you can watch in this last clip of the broadcast here.
That Wall Street and billionaires are spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to buy elections. Is that democracy or is that oligarchy? Which is why I believe we've got to overturn Citizens United and move to public funding of elections. Is it right that in the greatest, wealthiest country in the history of the world, so many of our young people can't even afford to go to college or leave school deeply in debt? In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, if we stand up, fight back, we can do a lot better. That's why I'm running for president.
Secretary, Senator, we want to thank both of you for being here, for joining us tonight. And of course, we want to thank all.
So I don't know. What do you think? Seemed to me like Bernie Sanders got a standing ovation from a significant part of the crowd there, and it seemed to freak out Hillary Clinton a little bit. I don't know. Am I overreading the little back and forth that the camera gave in those last few seconds of the standing ovation with Hillary Clinton laughing and then looking down at her notes? You can tell me what you think was the meaning of that last little interaction between Bernie Sanders, the crowd, and Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton and her notes down on the podium. I just, for some reason, that struck me as worth showing to you as the final clip. I'm also going to try to do another debate clip roundup about 24 hours from now, because tonight there's the Republican CNN debate from Miami, and it will take me about 24 hours to get that all ready. So maybe sometime tomorrow afternoon, evening, California time here, just like this started right around 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's Greenwich Mean Time minus 8 hours right now for those of you who are over in Europe. I know I have a bunch of European viewers. I've been reading your live comments along the way. Although it's only Greenwich Mean Time minus 8 hours for a couple more days, because when I come back on Sunday for my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup, which should also be right around 5 p.m. Pacific time, but then it'll be Greenwich Mean Time minus 7 hours, because it'll be the end of our weird thing in the United States here we call daylight savings. So thank you, all of my live viewers who joined me and kept me company while I was showing you the clips. And if you're watching this as a recorded show, you can let me know what you think about who won the debate or about my commentary on the clips. And I hope you appreciated all the clips I picked out for you. I put a link down in the video description. You can become one of my patrons and support me making these political videos for the rest of the campaign without having to worry about monetization. I don't know if I'll get any copyright claims. You notice I shrunk the videos down and put it on that LiberalViewer logo background. We'll see if that helps, and if it does help, then maybe I'll be able to monetize more of these debate videos. And in any case, whether I can monetize it or not, I will keep covering the debates and the Sunday morning news analysis shows, and until I upload my next video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.